Well, this live stream slightly different than the usual ones. It is going to be a what I watched live stream, but specifically about the Glasgow Film Festival. There it is there, the Glasgow Film Festival. So that ran for about, I think it was 9 or 10 days, the last week in February and the first week in March. I saw a total of 13 movies, and I'm going to do a kind of mini review for each of the movies that I saw at the Glasgow Film Festival. So, without further ado, let's crack on with it. Right. So, the opening night movie, the opening gala movie, was a movie called Tornado. Now, this is a Tim Roth starring movie. It's written and directed by John McClane, a Scottish filmmaker. Tornado tells the story of Tornado. That's the lead character. It's a young Japanese woman living in the wilds of Scotland in the 1700s. She's living and working with her dad, along with a group of like traveling performers, kind of like a circus act, like, you know, strong men, bearded lady, that sort of thing. Was there a bearded lady? Not sure if there actually was a bearded lady. Anyway, the part of this travelling crew. The movie literally opens with Tornado running away from what we assume is the bad guys. Chief among them is Tim Roth. He's ably assisted by a few characters, Rory McCann being one of them. Let's see, what's the review for Tornado? Yeah, so as I said, it literally opens with the chase, which is kind of like the second act of the movie, and then it rewinds to the first act and you get to see what happened and why they're running away. I won't go into too much spoilers of that. We'll just kind of dive straight into the review of the movie. Yeah, the star of this movie, even though it's got Tim Roth in it, Tim Roth isn't the star. The star of this movie is Scotland. It's equal parts beautiful and bleak in this movie, in Tornado. It's the use of natural light and showing the landscape, the harsh but beautiful landscape. Really, it's almost as if the Scottish landscape is a character itself in the movie, and that really helps sell the atmosphere of what's going on. You can feel the cold, the damp, and the mud. You know, the Scottish weather is quite unique in the world. As I said, the rain, the damp, the mud. Like, I swear at one point during the screening, I was sitting there and my feet were cold because it just looked that cold. It just looked that cold on screen. What else did I like about this movie? The score was quite good, quite affecting at times. As I said, I like how it started off like showing you the beginning of Act 2 and then goes back to show you Act 1 and then kind of breezes through Act 2 again because you've already seen it, kind of. And then shows you Act 3, kind of like Kill Bill-ish a little bit. It reminded me a little bit of The Revenant as well, just with, like, you know, it's set in the, you know, past and pre-industrial times. It's cold, it's bleak. It looks like it just uses a lot of natural light to tell the story. It's nice wide shots, there's deep focus and whatnot. The director, John Mackay, briefly spoke about that. I was fortunate enough to have a quick chat with him on the red carpet, and he talked about developing the look for the movie in that sense. So that was quite interesting. Another thing that I really liked about this movie is it's not a dialogue heavy movie. It shows you what's happening. It doesn't tell you what's happening. It's very light on dialogue in a good way. You don't need the characters to explain what they're doing and why they're doing it and where they're going and why they're going there. You just, you know, there's hardly any dialogue in it. Tim Roth on the red carpet briefly mentioned that as well, how, you know, a lot of movies you're forced to, like, you know, to walk and talk and explain what's happening, whereas in this, the characters' faces, the scenery, even the costumes, they all tell the story without having to like narrate what's happening. So that was good. It didn't treat the audience like it was an idiot. You were forced to sit and pay attention and watch the movie and kind of like piece together what's happening and why each character is doing what they're doing. It drops you off. It drops you off in the middle of the movie and it's off and running. Literally, which was a really good thing. I really did enjoy that about the movie. Let's see what else. So Tim Roth is the star, like he's the above the title star. Obviously, Tim Roth is going to sell the movie. You've got Jag Loudon, Takehiro Hira, Koki, as I mentioned, Rory McCann, rounding out the supporting cast. Everyone's good in it, but everyone's really good in it because there's not a lot of dialogue for them to play with. So, they rely on their other, acting techniques, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, to help sell the movie, to help tell the story, and that just works really well. I thought too many movies, spoon feed you the narrative, and it's just expositional dialogue after expositional dialogue. My only criticism of the movie really would be it almost felt a little too short. The last 15-20 minutes or so, without going into spoilers, felt like it just you got there too quickly and it just blazed through that 20 minutes. I would have liked that last 20 minutes or so to be stretched out, maybe even just to 30 minutes. I'll be curious if there was a longer cut of the movie where that final 20 minutes did have a little bit more time to it for the action to breathe a little bit. But yeah, really enjoyed it. So I'm going to give 7 out of 10 for Tornado, which was the opening movie at the Glasgow Film Festival 2025. Let's quickly jump into the chat and see who's in here. Let's see. Oh, my chat button isn't working. Where did it go? There it is. Cheekstar 13. Wow, I've got 13 movies booked on 4 days at the cinema over the next 10 days. I mean, that's a lot of movies to see when it's not a film festival. So good luck. Good luck with that. Yeah, enjoy them. This is the third start of this live stream. Oh, from your end or from my end? I don't know. Everything looks okay on my end, but let me know if there's any issues, guys. Right, let's move on to the next movie. So, opening gala was Tornado. The second movie after that was where is it here? Where's the poster? Where's it gone? Here it is. Long Day's Journey into Night. That was. Hang on, let me bring down this chat. There we go. Yeah, Long Day's Journey into Night. Jessica Lange, Ed Harris, Ben Foster, and Colin Morgan. It's an adaptation of a play by the same name. It's been adapted before. Kind of brief synopsis. Over the course of, I think it just takes place over 1 day, maybe 2 days. A married couple, Ed Harris and Jessica Lange, along with their 2 kids, played by Colin Morgan and Ben Foster, basically sit in the various rooms and the gardens of the house and have those family chats that are the kind of like, on the surface they mean nothing, but the subtext of it is there's a whole heap of dysfunction going on in the family. Volatile exchanges. 1 or 2 of them might be dealing with addiction that's came back to haunt them. I won't go into too many spoilers, but as I said, it's a play that existed before, so that shouldn't be too spoilery. Yeah, that's more or less the story. The one thing I will say about this is it's very, very wordy. It's based on a play, as I said. I'm not sure how much they would have cut from the play, but it's very wordy. There's a lot of monologues. There's a lot of characters just sitting in rooms talking to each other or talking at each other and talking, contemplatively out the window to themselves. There's a fair bit of drunk acting, which is hit or miss at times, to be honest, and some interesting wigs and interesting accents at play here. The upside of it being a very wordy movie based on a play is there's some brilliant lines in the movie. The past is the present and it's the future too. That's one that stuck out to me. In a real home, no one is ever lonely. That's another one that stuck out to me. Jessica Lange is really good in this. Is brilliant in this. She was actually at the film festival. She did an in conversation with on one of the days. I wasn't able to make it to that, but I heard it went really well, so I was pretty gutted I couldn't make it to that. But yeah, she's brilliant in this. The hair and makeup department do this really subtle thing with her about her hair, where like it kind of gradually gets a little bit more chaotic and messy throughout the movie, which mirrors, her mental state throughout the movie. I guess it's subtle, but like it's there, and it's in the subtext. It's not in your subconscious, or I suppose you're conscious, because I did consciously notice it, but not in an overbearing way. It's really good the way that helps, like, I don't know, just get you inside the head of where her character is, I suppose. But yeah, as much as she is good in this movie, essentially it suffers from the same thing that most adapted plays suffer from when they're adapted into a movie, and that this is essentially four people in a room or in a house, so four different rooms in a house talking for a couple of hours. Like, the dysfunctional family dynamics will be familiar to people. They will resonate with people, but the dialogue won't. It just doesn't feel real. Now, I know it's set in, like, I think the mid or the late 20s, so I think maybe just pre-Depression. I can't remember the exact timeline of when it's set, but yeah, the family dynamics, people will resonate with that. There's a brilliant scene with Ed Harris and Colin Morgan, who plays the youngest son, where they have this, or was it Ben Foster? No, I think it was the youngest son. They have this like really awkward father-son hug, and I think that will resonate with a lot of people, like both humorously but also quite melancholically, if that's a word, as well. Yeah, it just felt inaccessible in a way, mainly because of the very wordiness of the movie. So I'm going to go with 5 out of 10 for Long Day's Journey into Night. It's a really good performance from Jessica Lange, but I just didn't click with the dialogue. Just almost felt like it was putting up a barrier and kept you out of the movie. The family dynamics, totally relatable. The dialogue, not so much. So, movie number 2 of 13 from the Glasgow Film Festival. I'm going to stop fiddling with this wee Velcro thing because that's probably annoying to everyone listening. So we'll get rid of that. Right. We'll take that off the screen and have a quick dive into the chat. Let's see. Corey's joining us. How are we doing, Corey? How are things over in the States? Right. So movie number 3 of the Glasgow Film Festival was a movie called My Dead Friend Zoe. Let me see if I can bring that poster up. There we go. So, My Dead Friend Zoe, starring Sonequa Martin-Green, Ed Harris, Morgan Freeman, and Natalie Morales. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that Natalie Morales plays the dead friend Zoe. It's inspired by a true story, which I didn't actually know until after I watched the movie, about a US Army veteran from Iraq or Afghanistan, and comes home from that conflict with a little bit of PTSD, as you can imagine. Chiefly that she is seeing the ghost of her dead friend Zoe. I will say this, the movie doesn't go where you think it's going to go. It's there's 2 timelines running concurrently. There's the present day, where it's after the war. Sonequa Martin-Green's character, whose name escapes me, is does it say it here on this wee screen? It doesn't. No. Anyway, so Sonequa Martin-Green's character, she's back home. She's trying to build a life for herself, but she's clearly got issues to deal with. She's going to counselling, group therapy, led by Morgan Freeman, who, by the way, clearly a vampire because he hasn't aged in 60 years. 60 years ago, he looked like a 60-year-old, and today, he looks like a 60-year-old. So I want some of whatever he's taken to look that young forever. Anyway, she's going through these group therapy sessions. She is also tasked by her mum, played by Gloria Rubin, who has got a small role, as does, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of this guy's name, Utkarsh Ambadkar. Yeah, apologies, because that's probably a terrible pronunciation. He's got a small role, but he's very good in that small role, as is Gloria Rubin. Anyway, Gloria Rubin plays the mum. She tasks her daughter, Sonequa Martin Green to help look after, but ultimately get ready for the sale of her granddad, played by Ed Harris, his home. So that's what the kind of characters are dealing with. Sonequa Martin Green is dealing with PTSD from the war. She's also trying to help out her aging granddad, who may or may not have a degenerative disease, Alzheimer's type thing might be kicking in, and so he can't really live alone anymore. So the movie plays like that, and then the other timeline is, what happens during the actual conflict with her and her friend Zoe. I'm not going to go into spoilers, but as I said, the movie doesn't go where you think it's going to go. So the one thing that I really did like about this movie was it doesn't feel too, what's the word? It doesn't feel like it's too saccharine or too sweet or too schmaltzy. It seems like it deals with, the realism of PTSD and these soldiers fairly respectfully and quite realistically. Green finally gets a chance to show off her acting skills. She's mainly known for, at least I mainly know her from The Walking Dead and from Star Trek Discovery. And while she's good in them, those are genre shows. She didn't really get a chance to show off her acting chops in those. Ed Harris, this is his second film of the festival, along with my Long Day's Journey into Night. He's great in this as well. He almost steals the movie, but almost, not quite. This is Sonequa Martin Green's movie, and I don't know if this will be a breakout role for her, but it wouldn't surprise me if it is. The kind of the tone, the vibe, and the atmosphere reminded me a little of the Zac Braff movie Garden State from, I don't know, like 20 years ago or something. Garden State meets American Werewolf in London meets Battlestar Galactica, ironically, with the whole, ghost of your dead friend, beside you taking the mickey. So it's really good. The performances are great. It's really heartfelt. The stats at the end of the movie were quite shocking. As I said, I didn't know it was based on a true story, so all of that was new to me at the end. So that was really interesting. At this point of the festival, this was my movie of the festival. My Dead Friend Zoe, going to give that 8 out of 10. It was my film of the festival at this point, but as we'll see in a few movies' time, it didn't end up being my movie of the festival. But yeah, 8 out of 10 for My Dead Friend Zoe. If it gets a cinema release in the UK, or if it ends up on a streamer, I would definitely check it out. Very good movie. Right, let's throw that off the screen and see what's happening in the chat. We've got Our Life in Horror. Hi guys, how we doing? How are things over in your neck of the woods? It's probably still fairly early for you guys, like 4 in the afternoon or something. But thanks for chiming in. We are chiming. Thanks for tuning in. We are chatting about the Glasgow Film Festival, which I was fortunate enough to attend, both as a movie fan, but also as part of the press, crowd for it. So going through the 13 or so movies that I watched at the festival and doing many reviews of them. 3 down, 8 to go, I think. Wait, no, hang on. My math isn't quite mathing there. 13 in total, 3 down, 10 to go. 10 to go, yeah. Anyway, so next one was a movie called Restless. Let's see if we can bring the poster up here for that. Restless. There we are. Now, this is a good one. I really did enjoy this one. This is actually, it just had a Cineworld Unlimited members screening, I think just a couple of days ago here in the UK, and it's getting a cinema release in, I don't know if it's nationwide in all cinemas, but it's going to be in Cineworld cinemas as of April 4th, I think. So, it's written and directed by Jed Hart. I think this is his directorial debut, I believe. Restless tells the story of Nikki, an empty nester who is working long hours as a care worker, and she's dealing with loss of different kinds. Her kids have moved out. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that her parents are no longer in the picture, so she's living at home for the first time probably in quite some time, and just trying to get on with her quiet life. That is until the dreaded noisy neighbours show up, namely Aston Macaulay, who is on the poster there on the other half. He's the dreaded noisy neighbour. They move in, him and his pals. They are up late every night making lots of noise, and, things escalate from there. So, hang on, where's my wee notes for this one? This is much like Tornado. This is another great example of showing and not telling what's happening. The set design, the costumes, all of these things, these all point towards what's happening in the mind of the character, in the mind of Nikki as she goes through this restlessness, this night after night of neighbours playing blaring music while she's trying to move on and kind of get on to the next chapter of her life. It's it's a really good movie. For a debut script, a debut director as well. It's very assured. As I said, it shows you what's happening. It doesn't feel the need to narrate and dictate everything that's happening. The performances are great. Nikki, played by Lindsay Marshall, she is really good in this movie. It's mainly I don't think there's a scene that she's not in. Everything is from her point of view. You're never, you're not literally through her eyes, or are you at one point? But yeah, I think she's in pretty much every scene, so she very much carries the movie on her shoulders. Aston Macaulay is the main noisy, aggressive neighbour, and Barry Ward kind of rounds out the supporting cast. Barry Ward, you might know him from Bad Sisters on Apple TV. He plays the cop. He's really good in this as well. Let's see. So the way it starts with not quite in the middle, but it starts with a scene that's in the middle, and then it takes you back to the start. And the director talked about how he wanted to give the audience a promise that the movie was going to go somewhere. That it wasn't just going to be another quote unquote kitchen sink drama. Not that there's anything really wrong with that, but it's a nice wee technique to make it a little bit more stylized. I think they were saying they shot it in something like 20 days. I was lucky enough to have a sit-down interview with the director, Jed Hart, and the lead, Lindsay Marshall, at the festival. I'll link to that video below. It's about a 10 or 15 minute video where we get to chat kind of in more detail about the movie. It is fairly spoiler free, so you can watch that video without having seen the movie, or you can see the movie and then come back and check that out. My only gripe with the movie would be that the ending feels a little bit out of place. It's don't get me wrong, it's entertaining, but tonally it just felt like that doesn't really belong in this movie. So yeah, it's 90 minutes, or maybe even slightly less than 90 minutes. It's a good length. It's not too long. It's got good performances, and it's a really assured directorial debut from Jed Hart. So Restless, I believe it's going to be in cinemas April 4th in the UK. Check it out if you can. Right, let's throw that off and we'll jump back into the chat and see what's happening here. Let's see, it's 5 p.m. here. We're at McDonald's, and that's awesome. McDonald's is always awesome. Acres of Movies, hello, how we doing? I'm not sure if you've ever been on the channel before. Thanks very much for joining us. What movie was the best of the week for you so far? Thanks, Stacey. Well, we'll get to that. So we're at movie 4 of 13, and so far the movie of the festival has been My Dead Friend Zoe, but as I said, that doesn't remain my movie of the festival. So stay tuned and we'll find out what my movie of the festival was. Cheekster says Restless has now been renamed to The Salt Road. Has it? I didn't hear that. Are you sure? Restless has been renamed to The Salt Road. Huh. I wonder why that is, and if that's true. Not sure what that's got to do with the movie. Anyway, Restless, or if indeed it is called The Salt Road, it's a good movie. Try and check it out if you can. Okay, moving on to the most bizarre movie of the festival by far. It's a movie called Ebony and Ivory. Where's the poster for that? There it is. Yeah. Directed by Jim Hosking, who directed The Greasy Strangler. If you've seen The Greasy Strangler, you'll know what to expect with this movie, with Ebony and Ivory. Not really sure where to start with this one. So, let's start with what the movie's about. It's a fictional imagination. It's a fictional imagining of a meeting between Paul McCartney and Stevie Wonder on the Mull of Kintyre in Scotland. If you're expecting a kind of contemplative, intellectual movie about two musical legends meeting and collaborating, this is not that movie. I don't know if that movie will ever get made, but yeah, this is definitely not that movie. This is weird. This is a weird movie. Like I said, if you've seen Ebony and Ivory, you'll have a rough idea. Sorry, if you've seen The Greasy Strangler, you'll have a rough idea of what to expect. If you haven't, like, strap in and try and make it through. Yeah, I genuinely don't know what to say about this movie. It's the best way I can describe it is it's an episode of Sesame Street from like the 70s or 80s with Paul McCartney and Stevie Wonder, but imagine that they are both, and all of the crew from Sesame Street, they're all high as on acid, and they decided to film it. And that's probably the best way I can describe this movie. It's just weird. Like, dialogue gets repeated and repeated and repeated. It seems to be like edited on dialogue. It doesn't really go anywhere or do anything. Both characters, especially Stevie Wonder, seem to be like extremely agitated and aggravated for reasons. Admirably, the actors fully commit to the weirdness of this movie. I think it does have its fans. Like there was one guy in the screening that I was in that was killing himself laughing. He definitely had a good time. I imagine he was a fan of The Greasy Strangler. I wasn't a fan of The Greasy Strangler, and I'm not a fan of Ebony and Ivory. Now, I did get to have a sit-down chat with the director, with Jim Hosking, at the festival. Again, I'll link to that below. It's about a 10-minute video. There isn't really any spoilers in that, so you can watch it without worrying about spoiling the movie. It's odd because I had a good time chatting to him about how he made the movie and about certain aspects of it that was curious to me. But during the sit-down chat with him, I was dreading if he was going to ask me if I enjoyed the movie, because, don't think I've got a good poker face, and I didn't want to lie to him, but yeah, did not enjoy this movie at all. It's just weird for the sake of weird. It's almost annoying. Like, yeah. I'm going to give 2 out of 10 for Ebony and Ivory, which I think is one of the lowest scores I've ever given. Just not my cup of tea. I'm sure it will have its fans. Probably one of the most polarising films. Definitely the most polarising film at the festival. But yeah, not a fan. 2 out of 10 for Ebony and Ivory. It's very weird. It's very weird. Right, let's back in here. We've got Our Life in Horror. Greasy Strangler is greasy. It is. So if you've seen, I'm very curious, if you've seen The Greasy Strangler, did you like it? Has anyone in the chat seen The Greasy Strangler? And if so, did you like it? I'm very curious, because I know that movie has its fans. Like, I'm sure that movie, which I think is 8 years old, I think it debuted at Sundance, so it definitely has its fans, but I'm not one of them. But yeah, let me know if you've seen The Greasy Strangler. Was it a movie that you enjoyed? Because I didn't, and I didn't enjoy Ebony and Ivory. Anyway, moving on. The next movie I saw, which was the first documentary I saw of the festival, which was Hill. Hang on, I've brought up a comment here. Cheekter says they showed the trailer yesterday and that was the new title, so he'll be talking about Restless, which has now been retitled as The Salt Road. very curious as to why that is. But anyway, let's move on. So, Hill. Let's see. Hill is, as the title and the picture there might suggest, documentary about... excuse me, hang on. Let me take a sip of iron brew from my limited edition Venom cup. Don't tell my son that I've stole his Venom cup. I mean, it's really our Venom cup. Yeah. So, Hill. One name, two world champions. In 1996, Damon Hill claimed the Formula One championship. In doing so, cemented his place in motorsport history, following in the footsteps of his legendary father, Graham Hill. Hill tells the story of champion Formula One driver, Damon Hill. Yeah, that's the kind of blurb taken straight from the website. Essentially, even though it's, a story about a Formula One driver, it's not. That's just kind of like the backdrop, the kind of the undercurrent, the skeleton to the movie. This is really a story about a son following in the footsteps of his dad, reluctantly initially trying to get out of his shadow and essentially forging his own path in his own way, because he's not his dad. And I think the movie is about him realizing that. It uses the tried and tested documentary technique of talking head interviews and archive footage. Now, given that he's a world famous Formula One champion driver, there is plenty of archive footage from the racetracks and the press conferences and whatnot. But there's also a fair amount of like home video footage that was shot by him just on the family camcorder. So it's not just talking heads. It's probably 50-50 between sit down studio interviews and the archive footage and the actual racing press conference style footage. What stood out to me, although I might be misremembering this, was I think there's only two people that get interviewed in this movie, and that is Damon Hill himself and his wife. Is it Deborah? Oh, I might be making that up. Anyway, there's only two interviews that kind of like that make up that part of the edit. Damon Hill and his wife. So it's really impressive that it keeps your attention for however long the movie is. I mean it's probably, it didn't feel too long, but I imagine it's roughly at the 90-minute mark. I'm just checking on the web on Letterboxd there. Yeah, 90 minutes it says. It does hold your attention for the 90 minutes. I'm not a Formula One fan, like at all. To me it's a really boring sport. I get that it has its fans, thousands and hundreds of thousands of fans worldwide. My brother's a big Formula One fan. I'm sure he's been to some of the events. It's just not something that I'm a fan of. But that kind of that just shows you how good and how effective this documentary is. I'm not a fan of Formula One, but I'm a fan of this documentary because, like most good documentaries, it's not about what you think it's going to be about on the surface. As I said at the start there, it's not about Formula One. It's about a guy and the relationship he had to his dad, such as it was, and then posthumously how he tried to forge his own path in the shadow of his dad. It's a really oddly intimate portrait of Damon Hill in that sense. So the director, Georgia Hill, not Deborah Hill. I've just saw on Letterboxd, not Deborah Hill. Deborah Hill is... Who's Deborah Hill? Is she a movie producer? That name rings a bell. Anyway, it's directed by Alex Holmes. He does a really good job of narrowing the focus and making you care about this person, even if you're not a Formula One fan, which I'm not. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, so I knew the name Damon Hill, the other like Nigel Mansell, Michael Schumacher, all these names. I knew these names, but I've never been a fan of the sport. So that's a testament to the movie that even though I'm not a fan of the sport, I was a fan of the movie. Yeah, so there's a little bit of crossover. Let's see, with the chronologically with the Senna documentary from a wee while ago, which again is a good documentary. I think I'm about to sneeze. Hang on. False alarm, no sneezes. There's a bit of a crossover with the Senna documentary, like chronologically speaking. But this has a different feel to it. Senna was a documentary about Senna. That felt much more like a portrait of a man on a mission. This is much more, as I said, this is much more personal and I think intimate. I found it, quite affecting and quite emotional at times. Even though Damon Hill, I think, must be in his 60s now, he's still got such an energy and like a youth about him. Like he's got a youthful face, even though, like I said, he must be in his mid-60s. Like when you see him racing in his prime, he looks like a child. He looks like a teenager. And then when that's intercut with footage of his dad, who was a champion racer but didn't look like a teenager, it's very clever the way they do that to kind of to highlight and showcase this is father and son doing the same thing, but they're two very different people. You combine that with the present day footage, talking about his dad, and it adds up to quite an emotional piece. I think that's getting a cinema release here in the UK. Definitely check it out if you can. You don't need to be a fan of Formula One, but if you are a Formula One fan, if you are a fan of Formula One, I think you'll enjoy this even more. I'm going to go with 7 out of 10 for Hill, the Damon Hill documentary. Right, let's jump back into the chat, see what's happening. Oh no, where'd the wee chat button go? There it is. So Our Life in Horror. Brendan didn't like it. I was laughing more than I thought I would. You're probably, hang on, let me take the Hill poster off. You'll probably be talking about the Greasy Strangler. Don't know what to say. It has its fans. I'm sure Ebony and Ivory will have its fans. You're all crazy, but fair play to you. Cheekster says, ouch, 2 out of 10. Yeah, man, it's that bad, which is a shame because, like I said, I really did enjoy the chat with the director. I'll be curious to see what he does next. He kind of, in the interview that I did with him, he actually talked about potentially wanting to do something different. He talked about wanting to not be repetitive. So I'll be curious to see what he does next. I'll happily go and see whatever he does next. But if it's in a similar vein to Greasy Strangler and Ebony and Ivory, probably won't like what he does next. Cheekter says, I've never heard of the Greasy Strangler. I mean, I don't think it's on any streaming services here in the UK, but feel free to track it down if you want. I've never been into Formula One, but F1 movie looks awesome. I'll be watching that in IMAX at Leicester Square. Oh yeah, that's the Brad Pitt Formula One movie, isn't it? I'm not into Formula One either, but it's Hell is a good movie. Jim's Retro Emporium. Jim, how are we doing? If you've just tuned in, I'm going through all the movies that I watched at the Glasgow Film Festival last week, or last month, in the last couple of weeks. About 13 movies in total. We're at movie 5 or movie 6, I think. So far, the best of the festival has been My Dead Friend Zoe, and the worst of the festival, Ebony and Ivory. But that may change. Let's find out. So after Hill, it was another documentary called Desire, the Carl Craig story. Carl Craig being the world famous techno DJ. Similar to the Damon Hill documentary, it tells the story of an exceptionally talented person talking about the thing that he is talented for. That doesn't make sense. An exceptionally talented person. Hang on, let me read what I wrote, because I probably wrote it more eloquently than that. So it's told through a fairly even mix of sit-down interviews and in-situ chats, like, at his home and in the studio and things like that, along with a fair amount of archive footage from him growing up and, concerts that that have been filmed over the past, few decades. I'm not a techno fan at all, but I know the name Carl Craig. I know that he's a famous dance DJ or techno DJ. So, he was big enough to break out of his niche for his name to be known in the mainstream, at least, because it's a name that I absolutely recognise, even though, like I said, it's not a genre of music that I'm a fan of. The look of this documentary is the thing that stood out to me the most. It's got a very high end but grainy look to it. I don't know whether it's like, I doubt they shot on film, but it's got that kind of like that gritty, grainy look to it, but in a modern way, if that makes sense. It does. It looks really good. The like the contemporary footage they shot of Detroit has that gritty, grainy look to it. Something that stood out to me watching the movie is there's a scene where his mum is getting interviewed, and she's talking about how she wouldn't let him fly to Europe without a return ticket, so he had to cancel a gig because the promoter didn't give him a return ticket. So he had to phone back to say his mum won't let him go because there's not a return ticket. I think at the time he would have been, he was very young. I think he was a teenager at the time. It's quite an adorable moment that stood out to me. A few nuggets of info that I picked up as well. It was really interesting to hear that things like influences on him, among others, were Black Sabbath and Vangelis, the movie composer, did Blade Runner and others. So Black Sabbath plus Vangelis plus the other musical influences equal techno. At least from Carl Craig's point of view. That's probably a little bit reductive, but I thought that was that was really interesting to see that. Talented people speaking passionately about the thing that they love is always going to be enjoyable to watch to a certain extent. But this one oddly just didn't resonate with me, like as much as Hill did, for example. Like, not a fan of Formula One, but I did really enjoy the Hill documentary. I'm not a fan of techno music, and I didn't really enjoy the Carl Craig story that much. I just felt like there was a bit of a barrier about it. There wasn't, I think for a documentary to really hit home, there has to be like either some sort of conflict or some sort of like deeper human emotion. And this just felt like it didn't have that. This just felt more like a portrait promo piece for Carl Craig. It's very competently made. It looks great. He's obviously very good at what he does. And, as I said, watching people talk about things that they are passionate about, things that they're good at, is always going to be enjoyable to watch to a certain extent. But yeah, I think this one is more going to be just for the fans of Carl Craig rather than, the mainstream audience. So I'm going to go with 5 out of 10 for Desire, the Carl Craig story. Right, let's throw that off and jump back into the chat, see what's what, if anyone is there. See, I think we're all caught up on the chat. We are. Oh no, wait, it's froze. Okay, the chat button's froze, so we'll just move. We'll move straight on. What was next? Okay. Next was a movie called The Return, starring Ralph Fiennes and Juliette Binoche, Charlie Plummer, and others. This is an odd one. I was aware of this movie before the festival. I think it might have had a limited release in the States. I'm sure I'd seen the poster. I'd maybe even seen parts of a trailer for it. But essentially, if you'd ever wondered what happened to Sean Bean's character after the events of Troy, the Wolfgang Petersen movie from, when was that, 2004 maybe, or 14? Anyway, yeah, this is that story. Ralph Fiennes plays... what's the character's name? Odysseus, yeah, which is the character Sean Bean played in Troy. So, 20 years after the events of Troy, Odysseus finally washes up on the shores of his home island, Ithaca, I think. Broken, beaten, big shaggy beard, more, unrecognisable as the king of his homeland, that he left and didn't return for 20 years because he was off fighting with Brad Pitt in Troy. Odysseus, he's the guy who invented the Trojan horse, for lack of a better phrase. There's a scene in the movie where like some of the farm workers are chatting to this guy who they don't know is Odysseus. They don't know he's their king. He admits that he was in the Trojan War, and he talks about Odysseus in the third person, and talks about making the horse, and how the war was won, but no one ever really wins war, that sort of thing. Yeah, it's a slow movie. It's quite an introverted, contemplative movie. Ralph Fiennes is great in it. He's never bad in anything that he's in. It's a very it's kind of raw it's a bare performance, literally. There's some full frontal in this one. Uh, Juliette Binoche is very good as well. She's almost overshadowed by Ralph Fiennes' performance, but she gives quite a subtle, understated performance as well. This one though, it didn't feel that big and that cinematic. It looked and felt like more like a high end BBC period drama rather than a cinema movie. That's not to take, that's not to say it looked bad. It looked great. I think, Scotch and Greek islandy type sunshine and candlelight and fireside. The cinematography looked great in that sense, but just the overall feel of it felt more high end TV than cinema, I would say. It's slow. It's contemplative. It takes a long time to kind of get where it's going. And then when it finally gets there, it does get a bit, this is exciting. But then it's like, oh, wait a minute, this is pretty much the end of the movie. So it takes a long time to be good. And then it's over before the good stuff can resonate and sit with you. Yeah. Not got a lot much else to say about The Return. Went with 6 out of 10. Ralph Fiennes is great, but it just felt high-end TV rather than cinema and took too long to get to where it's going. Yeah, so that's The Return. Not sure what the status with that is in terms of a cinema release, but if you're a fan of Ralph Fiennes, you should check it out. Right, let's see. What's next? After The Return, it was a movie called The End. Now, I know that this is getting a cinema release in the UK. Let's see, The End. So, directed by Joshua Oppenheimer, which I'm really curious to know if he's a descendant or related to, the Oppenheimer. The End tells the story of, kind of, the end of the world, in a sense. It's a post-apocalyptic, satirical musical that's 2.5 hours long. I'll just say that one again. It's a post-apocalyptic satirical musical that's 2.5 hours long. So let that one sink in before you think about going to see it. George Mackay is the lead. He plays the son. Michael Shannon plays the father. And Tilda Swinton plays the mother. And they all sing in this movie. Let's see, so the blurb on Letterboxd is 25 years after an environmental collapse of Earth left the Earth uninhabitable, mother, father and son are confined to their palatial bunker where they struggle to maintain hope and a sense of normality by clinging to the rituals of daily life until the arrival of a stranger girl upends their routine, and tensions rise, their seemingly idyllic existence starts to crumble. So, the first thing I'll say about this, let's talk about the good. So, all the actors involved are good. None of them are in bad movies. You've got Tim McInerney, Bronagh Gallagher, Daniel Ryan, Lenny James. They all kind of round out the supporting cast. But the main three leads would be Tilda Swinton, George Mackay, and Michael Shannon. And they're all doing interesting accents. Well, apart from Michael Shannon, I think he's just doing his own accents. The cinematography and the set design is like exquisite. It looks really, really good. The different rooms and the different color, the kind of muted color palette, kind of coinciding with characters' mental states and things like that. It's really clever the way they do that. The camera work as it goes from room to room in the bunker, and the colors change and whatnot. It's almost like the entire set is one of those mood rings that you used to get that would change, with your mood. So that element of it worked really well. What didn't work really well was the length and the fact that it felt like two movies in one. It's a musical, but there's not that much singing in it. There's big stretches in between, song and dance numbers, to the point where it feels like every time they start singing and dancing, it feels like they're just bringing the pace of the movie to a halt. Like, I'd love to see an edit of this without the music, and conversely, I'd love to see an edit of this where it's, it's more or less just the music, because it feels like two different movies combined into one. The non-musical element, which is like a fairly serious drama, and then the musical element, which is fairly fantastical. Those two elements for me, they just didn't gel that well. I kind of like 10 Cloverfield Lane meets the Joker would be my my movie mashup description of Joshua Oppenheimer's The End. Again, I think this will be a bit of a polarising movie. Sarah from Sarah's Popcorn Movie Chat, I think that's her handle on Instagram. I know she was at the Glasgow Film Festival and she actually did enjoy this movie. She just put her review up, I think today, so I'll link to that in the comments and in the description. I think this movie will have its fans. I just, I wasn't one of them. 5 out of 10 for The End. This one I'm pretty sure is getting a cinema release, so who knows? Maybe I'm in the minority and everyone will love it. Time will tell, I guess. So that was The End, starring George Mackay. I did actually get a quick chance to chat to him on the red carpet. The video for that I'll link to below as well. He was lovely. He was very nice and accommodating, and stood and chatted with all of the people in the press. So I feel bad about giving like a less than stellar review to his movie. He was great and lovely. His movie was less so. And we'll leave it there. So that was The End. Right, how many are we in? We've only got, I think, 4 or 5 movies left to go. So, to recap so far, movie of the festival, My Dead Friend Zoe. But as I said, that doesn't end up being the movie of the festival. Let's jump back into the chat real quick, see who's here. Chris, the film nerd, how are we doing, my man? I don't think you've ever been on the channel before, so thanks very much for tuning in. I'm not sure when you started watching, but we're going through all the movies I watched at the Glasgow Film Festival over the past couple of weeks. There's only about 4 or 5 left to go so far. The best of the fest, My Dead Friend Zoe. The worst of the fest, Ebony and Ivory. I keep coming back to, I can't stop thinking about the movie. I didn't like it, but I can't stop thinking about it. It stays with you. It stays with you. Right, let's jump back in. Next movie at the festival. So this was the surprise screening at the festival. So this is where you pay your ticket. This wasn't a press screening or anything. You don't know. You've got no idea what the movie's going to be. It's a surprise screening. It's not going to be like a Marvel movie or anything like that. But it ended up being, if I can find the poster, here it is. So the surprise screening at the Glasgow Film Festival, movie called The Ballad of Wallace Island. And this is the one that ended up being my absolute favourite of the festival. So it tells the story of Charles, who lives alone on a remote island, Wallace Island. He is a huge fan of a folk musician duo, Herb Maguire and what's her name? Nell. His ex-partner Nell, played by Katie Mulligan. Tom Basden plays Herb. They were a folk duo. They broke up. Herb went on to do a solo career. Charles, the guy in the middle here, he came into some money and basically is paying them to put on a private show on the beach of the island he lives in, said island, the titular island, Wallace Island. Essentially, that's the plot of the movie. Now, you might not think that's anything to write home about, but this movie is so good. It's written by Tim Key, who plays Charles, the main character, the guy who lives on the island. Directed by James Griffiths. It reminded me a lot of the Ricky Gervais Netflix show Afterlife, with the style of comedy, the blend of comedy and heartfelt drama. The visuals are very crisp and very clean. That reminded me of like an Apple TV show, like the way it's shot, the way it looks. It's very crisp, it's very clean, it's very kind of idyllic, although it's it doesn't say it's a Scottish island, but it's an island in the UK. So, there's various weather and waves that you're dealing with. The script and the performances are note perfect, especially Tim Key, especially the character of Charles. Well, he wrote it, so as he's saying his own dialogue, so it is going to be note perfect. It's got such heart and soul and pathos to it. The dialogue back and forth, the banter back and forth between the characters. It's comedy, emotional, dagger, comedy, emotional bit. I mean that as a compliment. That's the kind of the formula throughout the movie: comedy, emotion, comedy, emotion, and I mean that as the highest compliment. The songs as well, looking at the songs that the fictional folk duo sing, like I really hope they release that, because I would absolutely buy that album. The songs were great. It legit had me in tears, both from laughing and from crying. Also, apologies to the festival volunteer who was unlucky enough to be sat next to me during the screening, because she had to put up with said tears and snotters and me blowing my nose and laughing one minute and then crying the next minute. And I could actually tell she was looking at me at times. So apologies, random festival volunteer, but don't blame me. Blame this wee gem of a movie. I think it's going to be getting a cinema release in the UK. I'll link to details below in the description as and when I get any of that info. I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up being my favourite movie, not just of the festival, but my favourite movie of 2025. As I said, it was the surprise screening at the festival. The day that I went to see it, it was a long day. I'd already seen 3 or 4 movies that day. I'd done a couple of interviews as well. I was absolutely shattered, and I was ready to call it quits and just go home and skip this screening because, as I said, I was shattered, and it's a surprise screening, so I had no idea what movie we were going to be getting shown. I'm so glad that I stayed to watch this. 9 out of 10 for The Ballad of Wallace Island. Absolutely 100% go and see this when it comes out. I think I'm just looking at the poster there. I think it actually says in cinemas March 28th, March 26th. The text is really small and I'm old, so I can't quite see it. Hang on, let me check. Yeah, end of March it comes out, apparently. Definitely check that out. It is bloody brilliant. An absolute wee gem of a movie. So yeah, well done to everyone involved. And again, apologies to the festival worker who put up with me crying. Right, let's see what's next. Cheeks are jumping in. Well, the movie's shown at a top quality cinema. So most of the movies were shown at the GFT, which is the Glasgow Film Theatre, which is the local, art house cinema in Glasgow. It's not part of a chain. There was some movies shown at Cineworld in Glasgow city centre. Just on their kind of smaller screens. They were mainly press screenings. The GFT is a good screen. They do show 70mm prints there. I saw Oppenheimer there last year on a 70mm print, not 70mm IMAX, but just 70mm film. It's an art house cinema, so it's not an IMAX. But they've got 3 screens, and GFT 1, the main screen, it is a good screen. There's some technical info about the screen because I know you're into that on my Oppenheimer video that I did last year. I'll link that below as well, because that's probably got a link to the tech info at the GFT. So as I said, it's not an IMAX screen, but it's a decent screen. Never heard of The Ballad of Wallace Island, but I've added it to my IMDb watch list. It releases 30th of May in the UK. Maybe it's March in America. Yes, this is brilliant. Go and see it when it comes out in May. Right. Nearly there, guys. Let's move on. So the next film up. This was another cracking movie from the festival. A movie called Sharp Corner. Ben Foster stars. It's directed by Jason. Let me double check. Jason Buxton. I think it might have had a festival screening or 2 last year. Ben Foster Colby Smulders are the two leads in this movie. They play a husband and wife. They've got their little boy who's maybe like 5 or 6 years old. They finally move out of the city into kind of the countryside, into an idyllic home that turns out to be slightly less than idyllic because the main road outside is a sharp corner and, it's quite prone to car accidents. I'm not going to say much more on the plot because I went into this knowing next to nothing about it, and I think that was I was all the better for that. I enjoyed the movie even more knowing almost nothing about it. I think the official blurb is follows a dedicated family man who becomes obsessed with saving the lives of car accident victims on the sharp corner in front of his house, an obsession that could cost him everything. So that's like the official blurb of the movie. It's very good. It's very good. It doesn't go where you think it's going to go. It's an absolute career best performance from Ben Foster, and he's already got quite an impressive filmography. Colby Smulders is great, and as well, she's probably most well known as Agent Maria Hill in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but she's really good in this as well. But this is definitely the Ben Foster show, and he puts on an absolute clinic. It oddly kind of reminded me of Unbreakable, in that it almost feels like an origin story for a supervillain. Like Unbreakable meets Nightcrawler would be my my movie mashup description of this movie. Both those movies are great, and Sharp Corner is great. It starts off, like a normal movie, but with something that makes you feel uneasy, and then the tension and the uneasiness of it just, slowly ramps up over the 2 hours ish runtime. Like the sound design is very on point as well, because there's a lot happening. There's a lot happening off camera that you hear, and then you catch up to it with the character. So that's all really technically top notch, and really helps you get into the mindset and the mind of Ben Foster's character. Can't remember his name in it, but yeah, it's follows his descent into not madness, but obsession. I would say it's got a lot in common with Nightcrawler. It would make for an interesting double bill with Nightcrawler. I would say the Jake Gyllenhaal movie, which if I remember rightly, he didn't get nominated for, and he absolutely should have for that movie. And I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if Ben Foster got nominated for this movie, depending on how and when it gets released. Yeah, so 8 out of 10 for Sharp Corner. Not sure if it's getting a cinema release. When I was chatting to the folks at the film festival, they said it was close to maybe securing a cinema release in the UK. Again, as and when these movies get a cinema release, I'll put them in the stories on Instagram. But yeah, Sharp Corner, 8 out of 10. It wasn't my favourite film of the festival, but it was the favourite of a few folks at the festival. So yeah, Sharp Corner, 8 out of 10. It's very good. Right, only a couple left, guys. Let's jump back over here, see if the chat button is back working. I'm not sure if it is. Has it gone? Not sure. Anyway, let's go back to the next movie, which is a movie called Zero. There we go. This was a bit of a breath of fresh air, to be honest. Most movies at film festivals tend to be, this isn't my phrase, this is someone at the film festival said, a lot of the time film festivals can just be misery porn. It's movies about people struggling, with their lives, kitchen sink dramas, documentaries about terrible atrocities, things like that. This one was a bit of a breath of fresh air in the festival playlist, because it's just a straight up entertaining action movie. It doesn't try and reinvent the wheel. But what it does really well. It's directed by Jean-Luc Herbulot. Again, apologies for probably butchering the name. Two Americans wake up in Dakar, Senegal. They've got bombs strapped to their chest. You can see that in the poster there. There's a voice on the phone, the voice played by Willem Dafoe, telling them what to do and where to go. And if they don't do X, Y, and Z by certain times, the bombs will go off. So yeah, action chase scenes ensue. It's kind of like Die Hard with a Vengeance in that respect. It's also got elements of phone booth, the Colin Farrell movie, because the guy on the phone. Um, it was a breath of fresh air for the festival. It doesn't try and reinvent the wheel, as I said. It was just a nice change of pace to see that. They screened it with a Q&A with the filmmaker and the two leads and the cinematographer as well. So that was interesting to hear them chat about the movie. You can tell that they're all friends and they all get on with each other. And I think they actually talked about, unless I misheard them, I think they actually shot this either just before or just after COVID. So it's taken a while for it to make its way to the festivals. But yeah, breath of fresh air. It starts off strong, like quite really strong, kind of falters in the second and the third act. Plot holes and character motivations get a little bit confusing, for lack of a better phrase. There's some inventive action scenes, and I'll definitely be interested to see what the filmmaker does next. I could see him, given the reins of a big budget action movie and doing quite well with it. Given that he wasn't, I think he's a filmmaker of French origin, so he's not, raised in the Hollywood environment. So I think it'll be interesting to see what he could do with an American franchise movie, maybe. Maybe give him the reins to a Marvel movie. Who knows? Yeah, 6 out of 10 for Zero. Solid little action flick. Falters a little bit in the second and third act, but pretty solid breath of fresh air for the festival. How many more have we got? I think there's only one or two more, guys. Let's jump back in here. Let's see, we've got Mockingbird says Ralph Fiennes is true brilliance. I'd watch him in anything. Well, you'll get to see a lot of him in this movie, should you choose to. My guess is you'd fall asleep before you get to that part, though. But, if you are a fan of Ralph Fiennes, is it Fiennes or Fiends? Anyway, if you're a fan, it's you'll probably enjoy this movie. Right, yes. The final movie that I saw at the Glasgow Film Festival, which was also the closing gala movie, if I can find the poster, was a documentary called Make It to Munich. So, Make It to Munich, directed by Robert. No, let me start that one again. We'll rewind. Make It to Munich, directed by Martin Robertson. It tells the story of Ethan Walker, an 18-year-old who, just months after a life-threatening car accident, nearly losing limbs, nearly losing his life in this car accident, decides to embark on a 1,200-kilometre journey from Glasgow to Munich to watch Scotland in the opening game of the Euros that year. Spoilers, Scotland lose. But it's not really about football. It's about this young lad and his journey and how, in the face of, death, he just, pulls up his bootstraps and gets on with it. It's 1,200 kilometres, not 12,000 miles, as somebody in the documentary hilariously gets wrong. It's a really good movie. It's a feel-good documentary, and hang on, take a wee drink out of the Venom cup. So, it's made up mainly of in situ GoPro style footage and small handheld camera style footage, because you've got these four guys making the journey. You've got Ethan himself. You've got his knee surgeon, Professor Gordon Mackay, I think. You've got the filmmaker Martin Robertson and the filmmaker's friend. Oh, what's his name? I think it was Stephen. They're the four guys who make the journey on bicycles from Glasgow to Munich. They said 1,200 kilometres journey. There's one or two, I think, support vans that make the journey with them, but they're not with them 24/7. They're just, they're the support van. As I said, mainly made up of, contemporary GoPro on the bikes and handheld camcorder style footage of the journey, along with sit-down interviews, studio style, with Ethan and the doctor, the surgeon, and Ethan's family and whatnot. But yeah, it's mainly the cycle journey, and that's where the story is, and that's where the heart of this movie comes out, because it doesn't it's not a high-end documentary. It's not a massive budget. I think, they shot it just in a couple of weeks, on a shoestring budget, just like, chewing gum and duct tape. But that plays to the strength of the movie. It doesn't need to be like a high-end, big budget, glossy documentary, because that's not what the story's about. It's essentially a story about about being Scottish, I think, overcoming adversity and just getting on with it. There's a so I say it's a scene. It's a film about the human spirit, but like more specifically, it's a film about the Scottish spirit. Like as a nation, I think Scottish people are, we're quite fairly down to earth. It's we're fairly humorous at times. We just have a kind of get on with it mentality and try and have a good time. And that's what this film shows. Like Ethan had a life-threatening injury. He's probably never going to play football again, which was his chosen career. But he just gets on with it. And he gets on with it with a smile on his face. And it's such an insanely infectious smile that he has on his face. Admittedly, his version of just getting on with it was to cycle 1,200 kilometres and go and watch Scotland lose at football, as they tend to do. But yeah, it's just a really good feel-good movie. There's a scene, the scene that kind of stood out most to me in this one was, there's a scene where his mum is in the car talking to the surgeon, Professor Gordon Mackay, who they're not in the same, they're not in the same car. They're in different parts. I don't know if they're in different countries at this point. I don't think they are. I think it's at the start of the journey. But basically, Ethan's mum is on the phone to the doctor who's going to be looking after him on this trip, and she's basically saying, "Now make sure you look after my boy." And she's trying to hold back the emotion and the tears, but it's like you can feel it bubbling under the surface. And she's basically saying to this guy, I almost lost my son. Look after him for me, because he's cycling 1,200 kilometres to another country. So please look after my boy. And that's the scene that really hit home the most. And it's a scene that I think must have been shot with just the GoPros or mobile phones or the tiny wee cameras, but it doesn't matter because it's just capturing like the true, real, raw emotion of a mum talking about her son and how she needs him to be safe because she almost lost him. To me, that was the crux of the movie. Ethan going through what he went through, but it didn't just affect him. It affected his family as well. Let's see what else have we got here. The graphics in it are really good. They're kind of like quite humorous, quite lo-fi. Like you can see kind of from the poster there, it's like got that kind of Monty Python-esque 2D animated paper graphicness. That, if that makes sense, that works for the movie quite well. Let's see what else we got in my notes here. It reminded me a little bit of the Ewan McGregor, Charlie Burman TV documentaries called, I think, Long Way Round, Long Way Up, Long Way Down, where they go on motorbikes and travel around the world the long way, and then they travel up the long way and they travel down the long way. Even though those are TV documentaries, and so it's told over the course of 8 1-hour episodes or something like that. It reminded me of them a little bit, but I also think that's because one of the main characters in them, Ewan McGregor, is a Scottish guy as well. So you get that Scottish humour, that Scottish mentality, that Scottish way of looking at the world. It's just a really good life-affirming movie. Life-affirming, feel-good, triumph of the human spirit, all of these cliched things, which, are kind of like saccharine to say, but just because they're cliches doesn't mean they're not true. It's a feel-good movie at a time in the world where, we need feel-good movies and feel-good stories like this. I think it's getting a limited release in the UK, at least here in Scotland. Definitely check it out if you can. 8 out of 10 for Martin Robertson's Make It to Munich. That was the last film of the Glasgow Film Festival. Right. That didn't take as long as I thought. So, 13 movies. Let me just double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yep. 13 movies I saw at the Glasgow Film Festival. Want to thank everyone at the festival, the staff and the volunteers for having me along and putting up with my annoying questions at times. It was an experience. I never actually, even though I've lived in Glasgow my whole life, and I'm a fan of movies, I don't think I've ever been to the Glasgow Film Festival. At least not like purposefully. I might have randomly caught one or two movies at the time without really thinking about it. But this is the first time I planned to go to the festival, and yeah, had a really great time. Don't think there's any other comments in the chat there, so I'll just say thanks very much to everyone for tuning in. I'll put links to these movies in the description below. As I said, movie of the festival was the Ballad of Wallace Island. When that comes out in the cinema, you should absolutely go and check it out. I'll say goodbye there, and I'll catch you in the next video.